Hello, my name is Bob Kenny, and we're going to be talking about self-evaluating your supervisory competencies. Now, this conversation is a part of our Building Management Skills for Prevention Professionals video series. And before we get started with the content, I'd like to ask kindly, please, that you just take a moment to read through this slide. Okay, I have a question for you. Have you ever had a good supervisor? Have you ever had a great manager or supervisor? Have you ever worked with somebody as your manager or supervisor whom you would consider to be exceptional or really one of the best? Why? What was it about that person that would allow you to categorize them as among your best? Is this somebody from your distant past, your recent past, your current work? My best manager or supervisor is named Gail. I'm not going to say was Gail, she's still Gail. And one of the things that Gail used to do, one of the many things that she used to do that really kind of separated her from the rest was having complete and open communication with me. I never had to wonder what was on Gail's mind, but she also communicated what was on her mind with a great deal of diplomacy and tact. I really think she could have worked in politics or something. She knew how to work a room. She knew how to tell somebody bad news and make them thankful that she shared it with them. But I don't mean that in a way that is designed to make her sound manipulative in any sense of the word. She was just a really kind individual. And it was clear to me that she always came from a place of support, help. Her intentions, in my opinion, were always what they needed to be and were both demonstrated and explained in a very meaningful way. Now, the other thing that Gail did, this is another piece of her communication process. She worked remotely quite a lot, and her schedule was very different from mine. I would come in, and I was the manager of the entire facility, and so I would be there usually around 8 o'clock in the morning, and I would work usually until maybe 5, 6 o'clock at night, sometimes beyond, depending on what was happening. Gail, however, if she did come in, would arrive around 1, 2 in the afternoon. And then she would work until about 4 in the morning. She was one of those self-professed night owls. But I knew that as soon as Gail got up and prepared for the new day, that I would get a phone call. It would be her, and she would say to me, "Bob, what are you working on today? And what can I do to help?" I felt an immense amount of support in Gail's willingness to not only be open, honest. These days, we're calling it transparency in a really good way, but just the fact that she was willing to talk about my schedule, willing to talk about the resources that she could make available to me, including flexibility around dates. If I was behind on something, or if something else had to take a higher priority position, she was willing to shuffle my responsibilities and give me the kind of freedom and flexibility to get things done the way they needed to be done. What did your best do? How did they do it? Was it consistent with your core values? Is that perhaps why this individual may have been one of your best? I suspect that's probably one of the bigger reasons why Gail was. I think we're all driven in some way by our individual, personal core values. And I think the way that Gail managed my performance was extremely consistent with the conditions in which I tend to work the best. Now, even though each of us likely has a very specific, unique experience that has led to a unique group of individuals whom we consider to be among the best, it's also important to realize that in addition to those individual differences that each of us may possess in terms of our expectations for our managers, there are also some very key common roles and responsibilities for supervisors in general. I like to refer to these as the common denominators. Despite what your direct reports might expect of you, despite what your own supervisor might expect of you, there are definitely some common denominators that I think all managers and supervisors not only need to be aware of, but to use as sort of a starting off point when thinking about how to kind of set yourself up to be one of the best. Here they are. There are 7 key roles and responsibilities that no matter who you are, no matter where you're doing your supervisory or management work, these things likely fall onto your shoulders. So let's talk about each of these. And I want to encourage you also to take a look at the handouts document or student guide that's associated with this video, because inside you will have an assessment associated with all 7 of these. You will also have some additional information that I'll talk about in just a moment, but it's a nice way to sort of follow up on, so how do I move on from here? Now, the first is I like to refer to as assigning and distributing work. Anybody in a management or supervisory position is going to need to be able to set priorities. Now, sometimes the priorities will come from above you, but nonetheless, helping people to understand what are the priorities, acknowledging that what the priorities are this morning may be very different from what the priorities are this afternoon, or even by 10:30 a.m. So helping people to stay on top of what needs to be done, and then making those kinds of assignments that can help get it done is a critical responsibility. Now, this also can involve things like delegation, and being able to delegate effectively, being able to use delegation perhaps as a way to motivate your team, knowing that this individual is interested in learning more about this part of our business, and then distributing work or giving this person an opportunity to be a part of a project that will give them exposure to and help them to learn about that part of our business. In addition, I'm going to be, as a supervisor or manager, responsible for monitoring and controlling performance. This is just the basic performance management responsibilities. I need to make sure that quality standards are being upheld, safety standards are being followed. I need to make sure that our customers and clients' needs are being addressed and responded to in a timely way. I need to perhaps even manage by walking around and just being able to talk with people and just having impromptu conversations that may start with, so how are you doing? What's on your plate today? Like Gail used to ask, how can I help? I'd much rather be proactive as a manager or supervisor and find opportunities to talk with people about, perhaps before problems erupt or before challenges or obstacles present themselves, so that we can nip things in the bud. Reviewing and evaluating performance. I wish I didn't have to say this, but I am always, no, I should say that differently. I'm no longer surprised when somebody says, I can't remember the last time I had a good performance review, or I can't remember the last time I had a performance review. I believe the sign of a good performance review is that you and I are talking about things that we've already talked about. It's a summary of things we've already discussed. That's a good performance review, but I also think that's a sign of a good manager, a supervisor. I'm not waiting for that yearly appraisal discussion. As things are occurring, I'm sharing them with you. I'm using constructive feedback. I'm using coaching in order to help you to work through any challenges or apply existing strengths. I don't want to blindside you with something that I could have shared with you 7 months ago, because as somebody for whom that has happened, I didn't really like the feeling of sitting there thinking to myself and trying to hold back the following. Why didn't you tell me that 7 months ago when I was still had time to do something about it? I don't want to create that kind of scenario for one of my team members as well. So being able to have sort of an ongoing review, an ongoing evaluation, I think is a critical component for any good manager or supervisor. So what are you going to do to stay in the loop, to not micromanage, to give people the freedom and flexibility that they need to be their wonderful selves, but at the same time to be in the loop and to be able and to be ready to provide whatever kind of support or resources they might need. Now, training and developing your employees is also important. This also relates to the review and evaluation and the performance management, but talking with people about where they'd like to go, perhaps some career advice or career development discussions, giving people an opportunity to expand their existing strengths and build new ones. And let's face it, sometimes to close gaps, if there happens to be a skill gap that somebody really needs to work on, and helping them to create a plan to make that happen and to help them to have the confidence to know that they can indeed make it happen, and they're in a place where they'll get the kind of support that they need in order for that to become their outcome. How do you define leadership? There are probably about as many definitions of leader as there are people who've tried to define it. But leadership, I think, is a key ingredient in supervision. I think what it does is it sort of takes the control and the oversight and the managing and the coordinating, which is a must, and it adds to it the element of inspiration, motivation, engagement. You can have one without the other, but if you're a supervisor or a manager who would really like to see a healthy balance so that you can pull both of those out of your tool bag when needed, but also on the fly, so that you can really be a well-balanced manager or supervisor that meets both sides of the equation or addresses both sides of the equation. Communicate. Yeah, sitting alone in my office someplace is really not the best use of my time when I'm a manager or supervisor. I need to be able to communicate with other people to help them to get their jobs done. What are the expectations? How does this need to be done? Or perhaps the communication could simply be a great deal of freedom and flexibility in asking people, how would you like to begin? What would you like to put into practice as your first step? Where do you see this going? What do you think the best plan of action would be? That's all communication. It's called listening. Communication doesn't have to be lecturing. I'm one of those people who likes to fall on the side of the fence regarding, I don't want to give you a fish, I'd rather teach you to fish so you can feed yourself for a lifetime, not just for a day. So giving people an opportunity through your communicative techniques and tactics and strategies to not only learn and grow and evolve and develop, but to also feel good about the fact that they are moving forward, and giving them an opportunity to see you as somebody who's not only accessible, but also approachable. Because I think being a good communicator also means being a good recipient of others' communication. So when people have something they want to share with you, do you multitask? When somebody knocks on your door and says, hey, I'd like to run an idea by you, are you finishing up an email message while they're talking to you and you're saying, no, I'm listening, go on, as you're typing, and so I hope to hear back from you by That's not what people are looking for. That's not what you and I would look for. And it's certainly not something that I would see in somebody who's a good manager or supervisor. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm going to be open to every interruption that takes place during the day. But if now's not a good time, I might say, we can talk now, but I probably can only take 5 minutes. And then I'm going to need to finish this report that I'm finishing. If you come back, however, at 1:30 this afternoon, I can give you every minute that you would like. And I'd rather do that. How does that work for you within your schedule? Again, it's all about communication and making sure that both you and the other person are able to share information and share ideas with each other effectively. And then handle administrative duties. Let's face it, most people's job descriptions these days say "and other assigned work." But sometimes that other assigned work, well, yeah, it is essential. So being able to, for instance, document performance could be a part of your performance management. Being able to organize and keep paperwork and records up to date. Making sure that you are creating documents that talk about performance improvement plans that individuals are working on, sharing information that might be coming down to you from above for you to share with those who report to you. There are just so many different things in terms of the administration of what gets done inside your organization that likely will fall onto your shoulders. But exactly what that's going to look like, of course, is going to be different pretty much every time in just about every place. Now, the other part that I had referred to earlier, for new managers or for existing managers who are wondering, did I truly take advantage of all of those opportunities? Did I do everything that I could have, should have done when I first became a manager here? And if not, where might I have left some openings that I could go back and fill now? These are my 17 suggestions for how to create a much easier, a smoother transition into a supervisory role. If you happen to be a new supervisor, if you happen to be a supervisor for a team who's new to you, maybe you've been a supervisor before, but you're new to this team. And even if you're in a current supervisory role and wondering if there's any more that you could do, I hope that you find some inspiration in this list and you have much more detailed descriptions and suggestions in the handout document. So Kristen, before we finish this video, I'd like to ask you to come in and tell me if there's anything on your mind that we could talk about to wrap this up.
Yeah, the only thing that comes to mind for me is, I guess, what recommendations would you have for a supervisor to look at their own growth if they find themselves lacking a little shorter in one supervisory area? How might they go about looking for resources or ways they can work on those specific areas themselves, either kind of self-directed or through other means?
I have so many things going through my mind now. I'm trying to decide what to share. I love the question because what it does is, let me just kind of go back to the last slide, just whoops, back, not forward. There we go. Because what I'm thinking about is self-management, self-supervision. It's quite possible that one of the ways as a supervisor, I might be able to address my own growth and my own development is just by looking at me, looking at myself as one of my direct reports and thinking about what kinds of work opportunities or assignments should I be seeking? Talking, of course, to my supervisor, to my manager. I mean, unless I'm at the very top of the organization, there's somebody to whom I report. So anything that I would be doing with my team members to help them with their growth and development, I should be looking for from my own manager. So talking with them about what my goals are, what my career aspirations are, and what kinds of opportunities would help me to get closer to that. And then I'm looking at the monitoring and controlling performance. I need to also be looking at what I'm currently doing and where I'm exceeding expectations, where I'm perhaps falling short, where my strengths are, where my improvement opportunities are. Those also are growth opportunities. Now, unfortunately, some of us have managers or supervisors who don't give us a lot of feedback, who don't facilitate helpful performance appraisals, who might take on the motto, no news is good news. So even if I'm not in a position where I have a manager who manages that way, I still think that self-management, self-supervision is a wonderful way to exercise empowerment when it comes to my own growth and development, and be looking at what I'm doing, how I could be doing it better, other avenues or other things to which I can apply my existing strengths. What else would I like to learn? What opportunities exist, including work assignments, committees, projects I might want to become a part of. And again, even if my own manager or supervisor is doing a great performance review, I'm looking at the third one here, they might not know to ask me to do my own performance evaluation or performance appraisal, but I need to be doing that as well. So rather than relying on my own manager or supervisor to do these things with me, for me, I think taking responsibility for it, for your own growth and development, rather than assuming somebody else will do it for you or even help you to do it, might be a place to start, so that if you do have a supportive environment, and if you do have a manager or supervisor who takes this stuff seriously, they're already doing this for you. What you're doing is adding value to the value that they're contributing to your development. So I don't think anything bad would come from your adding your input.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. Again, I'd never thought about kind of this list as something that could be a part of sort of a self-management strategy around growth and development. The other piece that I was thinking about, of course, as well, is emotional intelligence. And that's a term that is familiar to a lot of people out there. It does involve 5 components. And I think within each component, as a leader manager, if you're looking for growth and development, it's important to look within each of these 5. So the first one, again, is self-awareness. You know, in what areas am I strong? Where are my weaknesses, et cetera, et cetera. With that self-awareness, it provides me with an opportunity to better do what we just talked about, and that's self-manage. I'm not relying on somebody else to keep me in control or under control. I'm doing that myself. And I don't mean control in a negative, restrictive way. I just mean things like, you know, thinking before I speak. But my self-awareness leads to better self-management and self-motivation. Motivation is a part as well. So if I'm not really feeling as passionate about my work as I used to, I need to figure out why. And again, I need to look for avenues or opportunities that might reignite my pilot light if it's been blown out or if it's grown smaller. But then the last 2 of the 5 components of emotional intelligence are awareness or understanding of others, which often is accomplished through empathy and just trying to understand others and recognizing the important differences that others bring to the table, and then looking for ways, this is the 5th, to manage my relationships better. So in each of those 5, self-awareness, self-management, self-motivation, understanding other people, and then developing and maintaining healthy working relationships with those others around me. Looking for something that I could do in each of those five, I think would be a really good step in the direction that we're talking about right now. So I appreciate your asking that. You've got me thinking about supervisory responsibilities in a way that maybe I'd never really considered before. So I want to end on this note because I think Kristen just did for me what I was hoping this particular video would do with you, or for you rather. John Quincy Adams happens to be an eighth cousin of mine, which I guess means we're really not related. But I love this quote. As someone's manager and supervisor, if your actions inspire others to dream more, learn more, do more, and become more, you are indeed a leader. And I think one of the best ways that you can set yourself up to come to mind years later when one of your former team members is asked, have you ever had a great manager? Who is among the best? Your face pops into their mind. Because indeed, you did the kinds of things that would create that lasting impression and also create an experience for this individual that they look back on with no regrets and with a great deal of appreciation all those years later. So with that, I thank you.